the real meaning from the Buddhist perspective, the definitions of living being. So all those living things we cannot accommodate as real living beings. So the mind and matters. The mind means four kinds of mental faculties, matters, four kinds of elements. So the combinations of all these elements and mental energies exist together, then we can recognize all those living beings from the Buddhist concept as prana, the prana used by the Buddha in the Pali and Sanskrit language. Then I told you about worms and bacteria or germs and all sorts of things, difficult for us to accommodate as fully developed living beings. Again, plant life. There is life. Life processes and cells are there. Since we cannot find all the mental faculties there, so we cannot recognize plant life also as fully developed life. However, there is a very interesting article which appeared either in Asia Week or Far Eastern Economic Review. Very good article. Buddhist attitude towards the plant life, environment. The Buddha was born under a tree. He spent nearly 6 years in the jungles or under the trees. He gained his wisdom or enlightenment or become the Buddha under a tree. And most of his time during the 45 years services, he spent under the trees or in the jungles. In the end, he passed away under a tree. Some sort of relationship. And usually religious people, those who like to maintain peace and calmness in their mind, prefer to associate with trees more than human beings. Because human beings are troublemakers, so plants do not create troubles. Not only that, there are certain precepts or the advices given by the Buddha for the monks not to destroy plant life. This is one of their precepts. So by considering this in various ways, Buddha has given this advice by observing certain incidents and complaints. So in conclusion, we can understand the Buddha never agree with us, never encourage to destroy plant life. All over the world, actually, people are facing a very big problem because they have destroyed jungles and trees, plant life for their own convenience, thinking that they are developing this country or this world. Actually, they are not developing, they destroy. In time to come, we won't be able to live on this earth, because plant life contributes a lot for our living also. Then I mentioned there must be 5 factors for us to complete this act of killing, to become a bad karma, to face the consequences of destroying. So what are those 5 factors the other day that I explained? First thing, what is the first thing? There must be another living being. Otherwise, how are we going to kill? Whom are we going to kill? Second thing, we must know that this living beings got a life. This is a living being, but not a dead body. That knowledge must be there. Third one, idea or the intention of killing must be implanted or create in our mind. That means we must create the idea that I want to kill. So without creating this idea in our mind, we may kill. But it is not under this category. Then the fourth one, pardon? Oh, the method. There are various methods. That means simply by thinking we cannot kill. After thinking, we have to adapt some sort of method, either shooting or beating or stabbing or poisoning or burning or cutting. There are so many methods. So method also must be there. So after fulfilling all these 4 factors, after using our effort, attempting to kill, we stop. But the life still remains. That means did not die. Although we have completed all the other 4 factors, since man or animals or living beings did not die, we have not completed all the 5 factors. If all these 5 things are completed, then we had it. That means we cannot escape from the bad effect. Then what will happen? After using all the other factors, if the last one is not completed, what will happen? Do you think that we have not created any bad karma? What is your idea? I told you last Friday, we have created bad karmas, but they are not very strong. They cannot become weighty karmas, heavy karmas. Such karmas are changeable through the influence of certain other good karmas. Can understand that? After fulfilling all these 5 factors, and when this karma has become a heavy or weighty karma, it is not so easy for us to change or to overcome or to suspend the reaction or the bad effects of the karma. And the good karmas also like this. So all these good and bad karmas that we perform during our lifetime are not effective due to certain other karmas. Take for instance, during our lifetime, I told you, every minute, either by using our mind or words or action, we do either good things or bad things. No one can live without doing good things or bad things. Even the most wicked cruel person also do a lot of good things. He too creates some good karmas. Again, so-called very pious and religious people also create bad karmas. Whatever method they adopt to avoid, to keep away, they experience the difficulties. So they make a lot of mistake because of the world that we live, or the way of life, or for our living, or to support, or to do certain services, or to fulfill our duties. We make a lot of bad things. These are the problems we had to face as long as we exist in this world. We cannot lead a perfect life until we attain the higher stage of sainthood or arahanta. That is why we are here. That is why we remain here in this world. Because all those good karmas and bad karmas support for us to exist, to enjoy, and to suffer. That is how we continue our life. Good karmas support us. Bad karmas attack us. Then we enjoy, we worry, we cry, we fight. All these things take place due to our way of life. This is the uncertainty of our living, existing. Since craving for existence is very, very strong, I told you that we have three very strong craving, three kinds of craving. Can you remember what are those three things? First thing, craving for kama tanha, craving for pleasure. Not only human beings, every creature, tiniest creature in this world, struggle, fight for pleasure. But as human beings, we have increased and developed and organized how to experience pleasure. But the others, animals, have not organized anything. Systematically we have organized our pleasures to indulge, to entertain human emotion, senses and the mind. This is one kind of craving. Then we maintain anxieties in our mind. No one can live without maintaining some sort of anxieties. Because this question people always ask, is it wrong for us to maintain some sort of anxieties in our mind? Now you want to become very rich. You want to become doctors and lawyers and engineers and professors and big taukes. Is it wrong from the Buddhist point of view for us to maintain such anxieties? What is your opinion? According to your knowledge that you have gathered so far, can you tell me what is your opinion? It is right or wrong? This is under your general knowledge. So what I want to know, whether it is right or wrong. Very funny. All are keeping quiet, just like saints. Cannot say anything. Wrong. Who says wrong? Not wrong. Oh, I see. One group say right, the other group say not wrong. So what is the difference now? Yes. We cannot use the word wrong. Understand? But
because of these anxieties, we can violate so many religious principles. Then it will become a wrong ambition. You understand? Ambition you have to maintain, otherwise you are dead bodies, not living bodies. Even in the case of the Buddha, from the very beginning he had an ambition, but that ambition is not for his own benefit, own happiness, own salvation, but to gain something to serve others. But it is an ambition. So that ambition is a very pure ambition. Those who are planning to become rich or continue their education to be doctors, lawyers or teachers, they have very good ambitions. Doctors can serve, teachers can teach. Lawyers, of course you know lawyers are very honest people. I don't know what lawyers are doing, but their duty is to maintain justice. They talk about justice. They work according to the law. But even then, they can contribute a lot. Take for instance an innocent man got into trouble. If a lawyer can release that poor man, knowing that he is an innocent man, according to the law, he can do a lot of meritorious deeds. Point out the weakness of the law. So, we should not pollute our ambition with our crazy attitude for our own benefit by mixing with selfishness only for our own benefit, by disregarding others' feeling. So without violating or disturbing or bluffing others, if we can achieve what we want, so that ambition is okay. Never goes against the Buddha's teaching. So, then come to another kind of craving. What is the next one? Bhavatanha, meaning very strong craving for our living here and hereafter again, and also eternal life. We crave for an eternal life. We want to exist forever. We do not know whether it is true or not, but our craving is very strong, so we maintain this belief. We want to live forever. Again, we are willing to do any kind of cruel thing. We are willing to destroy millions of others for our own living, for our own protection. This is the nature of our craving. So craving for existence, even according to modern psychology also, will to live, their interpretation, craving for existence explained by the Buddha, modern psychologists interpret in different ways, thinking will to live. That will to live is craving for existence. So we remain here in this world, life after life, because of this craving. Therefore, craving for existence is not bad. It is not a sin. You don't commit any bad karma thinking that you want to live. The method that you adapt for your survival, and why do you want to live, for what purpose, what do you gain, you have to consider all those things. Then you can adjust your way of life for you to live peacefully without harming others by maintaining peace in your mind. Then your living is meaningful. Then the last one is vibhava tanha, another kind of craving. Meaning, what is the meaning of that? Craving for non-existence. That means you don't like to live. You crave for that. This is another kind of craving. First and foremost, we had to find out why you want to maintain such idea in your mind that you don't want to live. Due to certain frustrations, disappointments, unsatisfactoriness or unsatisfied desire. Therefore you say, I don't want to live because I cannot tolerate. I want to commit suicide. I cannot tolerate this anymore. This is one of the instincts that we have in our mind. It is intrinsic feeling in our mind. How many times a day we say, I want to die? It is natural. When you get fed up with something, you say, I'm better to die. Isn't it? You always say, see ya. When you get fed up, say ya. Die and finish. It is natural. It is craving for non-existence. Another deeper interpretation is, when you believe that after our death there is nothing. If not, we don't want to exist anymore. We don't like to have another rebirth. You believe that. You do not know that you cannot stop it simply by thinking. But you maintain that idea. You don't want to be born again, craving for non-existence. If not, there are many in this world, I think majority in this world, whatever religion they have, maintain that there won't be another life hereafter. This is the end of it. Majority. This is the nature of craving. So, one of these cravings always support us to commit this evil act of killing. Then I explain the purpose of killing. Is it for our own benefit or our own protection or to save others? Then the mental attitude is different. There is no selfishness. When we try to do something or to destroy some others who endanger innocent people, then you decide, either humans or animals, to go and kill, to stop this nuisance, not for your own benefit. But from the Buddhist point of view, we cannot say that person is completely free from the effect of this act of killing. Why? Because purposely he created the idea that he wants to kill. But the effect differ, the degrees, certain degrees. Since you have not developed your own craving or selfishness, or not even hatred towards that person or animal, what you wanted was to stop this, then you decide. Then you go and kill. You have to experience some sort of bad effect, but on the other hand, you have done a wonderful service. This is in worldly sense. You have done a wonderful service. People may regard you as a hero, not as a sinner. However, Buddhism never says you must go and kill. This is the nature of the Buddha's teaching. And the most important point that I have explained to you the other day that you cannot find Buddhist laws or Buddhist punishment. The Buddha has never introduced any religious laws, or he never said, if you violate this law, you will be punished in this way or that way. Not like other religions. His advice is, if you do this, you have to face the consequences. If you can avoid this, then you will be free from that bad effect. If you do this, you can experience the good result, good effect. That day I told you, he did not reveal this as a message given to him by a God, or not as a theory or traditional belief or a mythology. He said, I am telling you according to my own experience, how I had to suffer during my previous birth and even within this lifetime due to certain bad deeds that I have committed. Therefore I know, I experience why these things are bad. By knowing this, I am telling you, not as a message or theory or belief. Again he says, I have done lot of good deeds, meritorious deeds, life after life during my previous birth. I can understand how I experienced very pleasant, peaceful, happy, contented life. And within this life also I am experiencing. Therefore, I would like to advise you to do some service. Meritorious deeds means doing some service to others. Without doing any service to others, you cannot do any kind of meritorious deeds. Either to relieve others' sufferings, or fear, or support. There are various ways for you to do meritorious deeds by supporting others. So this act of killing also in the same manner. He did not say that you should not kill. There is no such precept in Buddhism. His advice is, if you kill, you have to face the consequences. So it is up to you to decide whether to kill or not. So if you don't like to suffer, then try to keep away from this act of killing. If you are ready to face the consequences, it is up to you. Nobody in this world who can stop it. Although those who observe as their commandment or religious laws also violate. They say God has given this law not to do that, but they do that. Now see the difference now. He has given a chance for you to think, to understand. So when you observe certain thing, or this is the law given by the God, or this is a religious law, therefore we should not violate this. If we violate, we had to face the punishment. Here you consider only about your punishment. So the Buddha's advice is, first you must think why it is bad. If you can understand why it is bad, it is not necessary for you to observe this as a message or religious law, but you know why it is bad. So that is more effective. By realizing this, when you stop, automatically you cultivate so many good qualities in your mind. Otherwise, no chance for you to cultivate all the good qualities in your mind if you stop your bad thing to avoid your punishment. People say, oh, I cannot do that. If I do this, God will punish me. They think only that much. Why not they say, let us take killing? I can understand that killing is bad. It is cruel. It is unfair. Create enormous sufferings, disturbances, fear. So when you consider in this way, you can understand why it is bad. Nothing to worry about the punishment. Now this is the nature of a man who can understand things. Otherwise they cannot define. Just follow all the religious laws and rules and commandments blindly. Please remember, this is the most important point. Not as a law, not as a commandment, not as a message given by the Buddha or God, but by realizing, knowing that they are bad. Again, good things. We do a lot of good deeds, thinking that we get a very big reward from God or from the Buddha or somebody. Again you develop your selfishness. Otherwise you never do good thing. You never do any service to others if you won't get anything in return. Then where is the development, understanding, compassion, kindness in your mind? Whether there is a reward or not, if you can render some service to others, by doing that, the happiness that you gain is more valuable than the reward. That is the reward. I have supported so and so when he was suffering. I saved his life when he was about to die. What kind of happiness you gain? And I supported that poor children who could not afford to buy books or pay school fees. Now they are doing very well. This kind of happiness you can experience throughout your life. Why do you worry about the reward? Now this is another method the Buddha has explained. If you expect something in return, you reduce your happiness. Remember this. Because you mix up that happiness with your selfishness. And today you give something to a poor man. And after some time that man come and tell you, yes, that day you gave me $10, here I came to return you $10. But you have been maintaining some sort of happiness in your mind, thinking that I have given $10 to that poor man. When he returned this $10 to you, that happiness is no more. Gone. Then, here, the second part of this question. In our worldly life, in our day-to-day life, we have to experience so many problems. Or the problems created by other living beings become real nuisance to us. We get angry, they disturb us. Ants, cockroaches, rats, lizard, rats, white ants, so many others. Then as Buddhists, what are you going to do? This is the problem. Are you going to destroy them or keep quiet? When your house is attacked by a white ant, you think, oh, I am a Buddhist. So I cannot destroy them. Let them destroy my house. Then you go away. Can you do that? And those crocodiles and lizards and all the other creatures come and disturb your food and so many things. Are you going to keep quiet? Let them enjoy. You have to act wisely. First thing, destroying their life is not the only solution. Please remember this. There are so many other methods for you to adopt, to avoid. Before you think that you want to destroy them, find out whether there is any other method to avoid. Let us take mosquitoes. I do not know who created mosquitoes. Now, Bandaraya fined us $100. We paid $100. They say we are breeding mosquitoes here in the temple, so we had to pay $100 for the mosquitoes. Because we don't kill them. Mosquitoes take the advantage. Ants. When I ask one of our members, do you kill ants? That person, no, I don't kill, but I burn them. He's a very good Buddhist, don't kill. I can tell you, I told you this story, very interesting one. A big rat about this size, every night come and disturb in my room when I go to bed and break the cups and saucers and the bottles, jumping here and there and cut this wire. Then what I did, I wanted to catch this rat and release somewhere else. This fellow is very clever, never enter into this cage. For nearly 1 month I tried to catch, did not go inside. Then I was thinking what to do now. I don't know to kill. Then many people advise me, our good Buddhist, advise me, put some rat poison. I say I have never done that in my life, so I can tolerate the nuisance, but I don't know to do that. So one day, early morning when I went to bathroom, there's a water tank, small water tank inside the bathroom, and I saw somebody jumping inside the water tank. Then I found out that rat dropped into the water tank and swimming. Water level is low, cannot jump. Swimming the whole night, this rat was swimming and swimming and swimming. It's a very good chance for me. See the punishment? Natural punishment. So I did not kill. So what happened? There's a big hole there on the top of the water tank. This rat, wanted to jump from there and drop into the water tank. Then slowly I managed to catch and put in a cage and somebody to go and release somewhere where he can enjoy his life. See, that is called power of metta, power of loving kindness. Without creating hatred, without creating idea to kill, there will be some sort of solution. But always it is not effective. When your house is attacked by white ant, you sit down and radiate loving kindness to the white ant, I don't think he will go away. And our temple, we lost, I think, nearly $10,000 worth of books eaten by white ant. I think they have digested the Dhamma properly, eating. Better than you. When you read, the books remain. When they read, book also disappears. So, I can give a simple answer to all these questions. This is the problems we have to face if you want to live. If you want to lead a worldly life. It is impossible for you to lead a pure religious life without violating certain things. Worldly life is like that. By considering this, many people renounce this worldly life. When they renounce, they can reduce at least 90% of these commitments. Now when you want to cultivate paddy cultivation, vegetables, how many millions and billions and trillions of living beings you destroy? Without destroying them, can you cultivate anything? This is the nature of worldly life. When you burn a jungle to cultivate or to build houses, like a housing estate, how many trillions of living beings, snakes and birds and rats and all the other living beings had to die because of that. This is the nature of worldly life. So when a person renounces that worldly life, he can keep away from many of these commitments. That is why he take the begging bowl and go out and find out the food for his living, and not necessary to go out and do all this work, only for his survival. Can avoid so many commitments. So in your case, you have families, you have to support others, you have to do your job, all sort of work. By observing all these precepts 100%, you won't be able to lead a family life, household life, worldly life. You won't be able to do your work efficiently because you are working with others who are very cunning, very cruel, very jealous. Then can you do business by adapting your honesty or sincerity? An honest man cannot do any business. He must bluff and swindle and black market and smuggle. Why do they want to do all these things? This is the nature of worldly life. So when you consider all these things, you can understand why the Buddha said existence here in this world create more problems, more worries, more disturbances, and commit more evil things than good things. Since we are crazy, we crave for existence, we are bound to commit all sort of evil things for our living. You can say we have to do all these things for our living, right? Then what is the purpose of our living? For what purpose? What do we gain? Live to eat or eat to live? Which way? We live to eat. We never think that we eat to live. And we think we experience pleasure, happiness from our birth up to the last breath. If you can record the time that you spent to maintain peace and happiness and pleasure, and the time that you have spent worrying and lamenting and fighting and quarreling and developing jealousy and anger and hatred and all those evil things, unhappiness, then you can see the difference. Whether we really enjoy our life or we are doing something else. So why do we want to fight with others? Why do we want to create enmity, anger and jealousy? Why do people get angry with us? Why do we get angry with others? Because of these things. So throughout our life, as long as we exist, we have to face them. So we cannot lead a pure religious life as worldly people. But you have to concentrate on your basic principles. If you take these things very seriously, your living becomes nuisance to others also. Now take for instance in your house. house is attacked by white man, and you are a first-class Buddhist. You don't want to kill anything. And other members of your house, they say some oil, what you call poisonous, this thing, and burn the whole thing. Then you say, don't do that. Don't, they're very bad, you should not kill them. And then your living in that house become nuisance to others. That is why you cannot go to such extent if you want to lead a worldly life. Then what is the effect? Reluctantly, but not wholeheartedly, we have to do certain things which we know they are wrong. But we have not developed our hatred or anger or jealousy or grudge or evil forces in our mind to do that. Since there is no other choice, if you do that thinking, oh, I hate this fellow, I burn this fellow, I burn them alive, then you have polluted your mind, you have done that act of killing with polluted mind. Then the reaction or the effect increase due to your mental attitude. So my final advice is, when you come across these problems, try to find out whether there is any other methods that you can adapt without destroying them. Then another part of discussion, when somebody is trying to kill us, what are we going to do as Buddhists? Are you going to keep quiet? Yes, there are many stories. Arahantas, they never fight for their survival because they have no craving for existence. In fact, they are living, their physical body is a real burden and nuisance to them. They are waiting to get rid of this nuisance of the physical body, so they can keep quiet. Since we have that strong craving, we cannot keep quiet. So whatever religion we have, at that time, this is also another intrinsic feeling, self-preservation, also psychological, one of the intrinsic feeling in our mind. It is natural. We are willing to fight to protect ourselves. At that time, we don't think about religion. After that, we remember religion. Understand? It is natural. Then, somebody try to attack you, and you also want to attack. Your idea is to protect yourself, but you have no idea of killing. In the process of this battle, beating each other, attacking each other, you may kill the other person. You have not completed all the 5 factors. Remember that? Because you did not create the idea in your mind that you want to kill him. But because of your beating or attack, that person may die. At that time you have developed anger toward that person. Then there will be certain bad effect, but you have not completed all the 5 factors to become that as a heavy bad karma. That is the concession. Then another point is missing in this question. Intentionally and unintentionally. Unintentionally, we may kill millions, even human beings also. We cannot create any bad karmas because we never had anger or jealousy or ill will, or never had the idea in our mind that we want to kill unintentionally. Unintentional means without creating idea that you want to kill. Now when you drive your motor car from here up to your home, on the way how many millions of living beings you kill? You know that. But the purpose of driving your motor car is not to kill them, to go home. When you walk from here up to that shrine door, how many living beings you kill on the way? So the purpose of your going there is not to kill them, but for some other purpose. These are the activities of unintentional. No idea. We know. Otherwise we cannot walk. Now there are some religious groups in India, even today, extremist. So when they talk, they cover their mouth like this, then talk. Yes. Now their argument is, there are so many invisible living beings in the environment. The heat that come out from our mouth kill them. Yes. No, it's not a joke. So they close their mouth when they talk. At night time, they don't want to light any oil lamps or candle light or anything. Small flies, moths and all those living creatures come and die. To avoid that, they don't want to light. They use the light at night time. When they want to walk, that is utter foolish attitude. When they want to walk from here up to that gate, they ask their attendant to sweep, to clean the whole area, to avoid insect and all sort of things. But they never think, by sweeping they kill more. For them to walk, another person must sweep, clean the path. This is the method introduced by the Buddha as middle path, not to go to such extreme to practice Buddhism. Don't go to extreme. Otherwise you cannot live. Buddhism spread all over the world. Although there were 62 other religious groups in India at that time, but none of them. Even Hinduism also confined only to Hindus who have migrated to other countries. But Buddhism spread all over the world because of this moderate, middle path, practical, reasonable. Can practice anybody, either in the east or the west, makes no difference. Yes, I think today I had to stop here. It's one of our friends is waiting to come and talk to you about some herbal medicine to get cured certain so-called incurable sicknesses. He said he would like to talk to you and explain certain things, why people suffer from certain sicknesses, even after taking so many drugs, why still there is no remedy for that. So he would like to speak few words, and I invite him. I think he's waiting there outside. Yes, gentlemen, please. If we can give this mic for him. Anyway, let us finish before we start our talk. Can you please get up? Let us complete our talk. Akasattha Bummata Devanaga Mahiddhika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakkantu Loka Sasanang Devo Asatu Kalena Satsa Sampatti Hetu Ca Pito Bhavatu Loko Ca Raja Bhavatu Dhammiko Idam Me Jātinam Hotu Sukhita Hontu Ñātayo Imina Punya Kammena Mame Bala Samagamo Satang Samagamo Hotu Yāva Nibbāna Pattiyā.
Brothers and sisters, a happy Valley evening. First of all, I would like to thank Brethren for allowing me to be here this evening to share some of the herbal knowledge, herbal usage to promote a healthier and happier family. Tonight, with me is my company's herbalist consultant, who is Haji Muhammad Qasim, a qualified practitioner and acupuncturist. Without much delay, I would like to call upon Haji Muhammad Qasim.
Good evening, everybody. I don't know what to say. After the Reverend spoke so much, I don't know what to say, really. I've got about half an hour, so I'd just like to pick on some of the things that are most important to remember about herbs and health. Now, herbal medicine is a way of treating the whole body. We do not pay much attention to diseases in the Western sense, or the modern sense, you could say. A herbalist always looks for the body's own healing ability. That means we recognize most diseases as not being something which fell down upon us from some unseen force or something like that. We see diseases as basically stemming from not following certain rules and regulations about your diet, about the way you live, about your habits, and so on. And the idea is to see the diseases as the body's way of eliminating certain things. For instance, when you get a fever, the modern concept of a fever was always that you must suppress it. You know, you go to the doctor, you normally get paracetamol, you normally get very strong suppressive remedies for fever. But the herbalists have always said, and natural practitioners from the very beginnings of natural medicine, or medicine that we know about, they've always said that you must support the body's healing ability, and that fevers are a way of getting rid of toxins, or they're a way of mobilizing the immune system. So when a herbalist sees you in a fever, he will ascertain how high it is. For instance, if it's above a certain level, then of course it would damage brain cells, and it has to be stopped. And you use any methods, including modern medicine, to stop it. But in many cases, it is below a certain level, and it could go in fact higher before, and then it will break. So a herbalist will always encourage a natural resolution of problems. The same with the inflammatory process. When one of your joints becomes inflamed through various illnesses, we will not always seek to give anti-inflammatory remedies. We will use herbal remedies which promote a natural cleansing of the joints, and in fact, in some cases they make your joints feel a bit worse to begin with. But then, after a while, you feel better. And this is the natural law that we follow in herbal medicine. Now, although different types of herbal medicine say it in different ways, the Western style, which I studied, kind of rediscovered some ancient philosophies about health. And I studied particularly the Thomsonian system, which is an American system of herbal medicine, which was developed by a man who was uneducated. He was not a medical doctor, but towards the end of the 18th century, he realized that modern medicine was not able to help many of the diseases that his family died of. And so he became thoroughly disenchanted with the medicine of his time. And the medicine of his time bled people, they burned people, they gave them poisonous things like mercury and arsenic, and it was quite a dangerous thing to go and see a doctor in those days, you know? A little bit more dangerous than it is nowadays to go and see a doctor. Just a little bit more. Of course, modern medicine has changed, and we are very grateful that if you do get run down by a truck, or you do suffer from a major mishap, modern medicine is there to help you. In many areas where I could not help, or a herbalist or a natural practitioner could not help you. For instance, a friend of mine had something stuck in his eye, and we couldn't help him, so we took him to the hospital, and the doctor did something very good and was able to take out this thing from his eye. That is modern medicine. But the problems that we deal with
modern medicine doesn't seem to be able to deal with. And this is because of the different approaches, and I was explaining earlier.